Well, hello everybody, and welcome to an Eclipse episode of Weirdly Magical with Jen and Lou. And I am Lou, and I am an astrologer and writer.
And I am Jen, and I'm an an Akashic reader and the creator of the Illuminating Journey cards.
Awesome, which are fabulous, by the way. So today, Jen and I are going to talk mainly about the upcoming first of three eclipses, which is on July the 12th. And this one takes place at, I'm just looking at the time, 8:47 p.m. Mountain, so 7:47 p.m. Pacific, 10:47 p.m. Eastern, and that makes it 3:47 a.m. on the 13th in the UK, I believe. just with my mental arithmetic there. And this eclipse is at 20 degrees of Cancer and opposing Pluto, who has retrograded back to 20 degrees and 0 minutes of Capricorn. And that's a very tight opposition on the eclipse. To add to that energy, we also have Mars coming up to make his retrograde pass of the South Node in Aquarius. So we'll speak to that a little bit. And one other energy that's quite prevalent in the eclipse chart is an Earth grand trine between Uranus in Taurus, Venus in Virgo, and retrograde Saturn in Capricorn. So I think we'll speak to all of those. So I'm going to go first this time, if that's okay. I just want to give my take a little bit on this, because this eclipse is the first one of this series to be in Cancer and Capricorn. Because what makes an eclipse is its proximity to the moon's nodes. And whilst the moon's nodes are still in Leo and Aquarius, and the next two eclipses will be on the Leo-Aquarius axis, the sun and the moon it's a partial eclipse, so the sun and the moon are quite far away from the moon's nodes, and they're in Cancer and Capricorn, the sun and moon are in Cancer, and the next eclipses after these three will be in Cancer and Capricorn going forward. So we're kind of beginning a shift into new energy. And now the energy of Cancer is very much about safety and protection and the home and your feelings, and it's the mother, and it's very connected with your ancestry as well. The moon represents the mother also, and Cancer is ruled by the moon. So this is a very powerful eclipse, even though it's a partial eclipse, because the moon is in her own sign. And what makes it even more powerful and transformational is this opposition to Pluto. Now, Pluto is about death and rebirth and transformation of all kinds. Pluto relentlessly transforms, and he's been in Capricorn for several years now. And Capricorn represents the patriarchy and our institutions and the rules we all live by, not just the community rules. And so you can see that this eclipse, just looking at the opposition with Pluto, has the power to begin some tremendous transformations and really push us out of our comfort zones and push us to learn to create our own rules and our own safety zones and really stop relying on outside support to create our own structures. Now, that's my initial take on it. What about you, Jen?
Well, fascinating, isn't it? So for me, I'm looking at right now the numbers, which we have the 20 degrees for the sun and moon, or 20 degrees 41, so between 20 and 21. The date is the 12th in some of the world and the 13th in some of the world. And then the Pluto, that strong opposition talked about, also at 20 degrees. So this is really fascinating because, first of all, we are in an 11 year, which is 2 plus 1 plus 8, which makes an 11. So 1 and 1 makes 2. And 2 is the energy of coming to terms with who we are in terms of there's one of the sayings I use is be a diplomat, not a doormat. That's a very 2 energy. It's that idea of how do you set boundaries to be who you are? How do you bring the polarities together? And part of this is some of what you were talking about in terms of rules. Like, we have a lot of rules out in the world, and those rules are about, a lot of them are about what other people have created. The establishment has created a lot of rules that may not work for us, but we've been following along, just doing the right thing, kind of just giving in to other people's rules, pleasing and doing things that don't make us feel good. And here's this energy coming in, especially with the 11 coming down to the 2, which is kind of insisting that we choose, because 2 is about choosing. 2 is also about connection. So in order to have that more powerful connection, more powerful rules, or more powerful way to live, we have to kind of bring our energy into these rules, and we have to establish new rules, which is what this is about. This idea of this new mother energy coming in to confront the government, the old rules, and change them, force some kind of change, because that's what the 2 is about. It's about balancing or bringing together the polarities, making those connections, and being willing to compromise on the things that we can compromise on. But we have to know who we are. We have to really be in touch with what's true for us so that we can compromise with ease. Because 2 is the first number of bringing things into the material world. Interesting that the 20 is called, the ancient Chaldeans called the 20 the awakening. So this number is about coming to that moment in our lives and going, I've put up with all this stuff, I don't know what's happening, and now suddenly I'm like, that's it, I'm done. I'm done with the old way. And I think this very much ties into what you're saying, that idea with Pluto, with this energy of the mothering energy, or the root of who we are, that Cancer energy, being illuminated in our own sign, and that idea of the light shining under the rock, and us shifting that energy between, it's almost like we're growing a new skin, or crabs that hard case around them, and it's like that's being ripped off, taken apart, and we're waking like, wait, I don't need that old stuff, I need something different. And so there's that energy of the 20. And also the dates are interesting. The 12th is a number that gives us an opportunity to grow and to find joy and discovery from what we've learned. So an integration of learning, or to choose to remain a victim. For this month, we're in a 7 months, so it's about coming to terms with our truth, our beliefs, really looking within, researching, finding out what it is that we, what is our wisdom that we want to live by. So that's interesting too. The universal month is an 18, which is a 9. And our calendar year is an 18. So we have this doubling happening. The 18, it's a 9. The powerful thing about a 9 month is that every day repeats itself twice. So while we have a 12 day, in the universal, it's a 23, so it comes to 3. They both come to 3, so it doubles the energy that's happening.
Mm.
It's very powerful. As these awakenings are happening, the energy is being intensified. And the 18 is this number about breaking the hard shell of our ego, or the need to be ruled by our ego. So again, it's that confrontation with an old way of being and an opportunity to bring in a new way of being, which can be kind of jump-started or pushed into it by crisis mode, right? And a crisis happening, which makes us go, I can't live the way I have.
And I do have to say, looking at the astrological chart for the eclipse, there is quite a lot of crisis energy in this. And that's not to say, you know, crisis, people are afraid of the word, but usually crisis actually just means something coming to a head where you have to make a decision, you know, and it can be something, you know, kind of in powerfully crazy, but it doesn't always have to be. We kind of go through crises all the time, you know, but this one has a lot of crises energy, a lot of shifting, and a lot. I see an awful lot of energy of learning from the past as well in this chart. So yes, it's breaking the rules that you currently live under, but it's not disregarding everything in the past. It's oh, excuse me. It's because Cancer is about the home, the family, the ancestors, the past. Pluto is about the grandmother. And to kind of switch to the nodes, the South Node is in Aquarius. And interestingly, Aquarius has this mix of old and new. It's a strange sign. It's strangely conservative, being a fixed sign, but yet it's very futuristic. And we are moving into the astrological age of Aquarius. And with Mars approaching that South Node again, I think we're being brought to a crisis point where we bring in the best of the old to work in a new way, if that makes sense. And I've been saying this for quite a long time. And this opposition with Pluto really brings that feel in for me as well. And also the Earth Grand Trine with Venus, Saturn, and Uranus. The two rulers there of Aquarius, Saturn and Uranus, involved in it, in the Earth Grand Trine. It has underneath this kind of forced change, relentless change energy in the eclipse. It has this grounded energy of really being able to bring some strong healing and almost a coming back down to earth. I very much go by what pops into my head intuitively with these things, and over the last week or so or longer, looking at this chart, I keep having, I'm not saying we're going to do away with all technology and things, but I really feel like people are being pulled more towards some of the older ways. It's become overwhelming, the modern world, and people want to go back to more kind of village mentality and back to the earth and back to simpler ways. And that underlying the eclipse feels to me like this is being brought in. So.
Yeah, it's just kind of fascinating. I think for me, what I look at is this idea of, and I agree with you with this idea that, first of all, being in Aquarius, right, this Mars thing and nodes, of course, Aquarius is a tribal aspect. It's also the aspect of science, in the sense of looking at things dispassionately and making choices. So it's not cruelty, but it is a coldness which sometimes is needed when we're going through change. It's like we're looking at the past and going, what is valuable, and almost like you say, skipping beyond the more recent past and our wounding and that idea of who we think we are, and reaching further back into what is the value of who I am, and kind of picking it apart and going, okay, what is it that will give me the expression to be who I am, or to experience who I am in this experience, which is about choosing some of the good things. Like, we're very conditioned to choose a lot of the shitty things, or look at the shitty things in our lives and go, wow, that was a terrible thing, that happened. It's kind of this, talking about crisis, but this is like this crisis in terms of it keeps us in a way, in a model of crisis, in terms of my terrible things are happening, people are treating me badly, people aren't respecting me, I'm not getting what I deserve. Those are all kind of negative aspects of crisis or living. Whereas there's a lot of positive aspects of crisis in terms of there's a pattern I'm breaking through. I'm breaking away from this old thinking. Here, for me, when I'm looking at Pluto and the moon, plus the aspect of the grand trine with Venus and Ceres there.
Oh, yes. Right? Of course, Ceres is there too with Venus. Yeah,
that's right. And Ceres is the Earth Mother. In the old stories of Pluto taking her daughter down, grabbing her and taking her underground and bringing the Earth to a standstill in terms of creation. So the thing is that nothing continues forever. Like, you just can't grow things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the Earth does need a fallow period. And so this is the same thing of being discerning about the crisis. Like, how are we reading what is happening to us? How are we choosing to interpret? Is it something negative, which it can be? Or what is the more interesting and more positive? And when I say positive, in terms of, what is it that you really want? Do you really want to get to that place of being somebody who's at ease on Earth and knowing the polarity of yourself and being able to find the balance? Or do you want to be in conflict with people, which is the other aspect of the 20, right? This here is, we're in this polarity right now of dealing with good and evil. Like, we've named these things and they're very extreme. And of course, Pluto and Ceres and all of these and the sun and the moon, they kind of expand on that, right? We can point to someone and say, oh, they're the evil person. I'm the good person. And there's a lot of that going on, which is good first to kind of get clear. But then at some point you have to go, okay, done with that. Let's move on to the next experiment. Let's move up, like jump up to, how do I internalize and accept the darker side of myself, the darker side of what I see in humanity, and still be in divine resonance, still be able to live in joy on this earth and not be caught up in judgment. Because that caught up in judgment, just look, what you were saying about a simpler life, regardless of whether it's simpler because we're digging in the garden and we're living with our friends and we don't have all this, we're not hooked into technology. There are some good things about technology.
And absolutely. And they were just examples.
Oh, no, I know you're not saying that thing, but I'm just using it as an example of discernment, right? We get to pick and choose what is it that's necessary, or otherwise we're totally distracted and we can't really be who we came here to be. You can't shine your light fully when it's, you're shining it in every direction all the time.
And to go back to the nodes again, the South Node in Aquarius with Mars about to pass over again, which will happen actually on July the 19th. Aquarius is, the South Node in Aquarius also represents our sense of alienation. And this kind of builds on what you were saying too, Jen, because the North Node is in Leo, which is ruled by the heart. And so, yes, there's this energy of detachment, of looking with detachment at everything that you talked about. But there's also an element, Mars cuts things out. And a lot of people in this modern world feel quite alienated from each other. And I think a lot of us are feeling the urge with these eclipses in Aquarius and Leo to connect at the heart, to really connect with people. And you can do that through the internet. So as you were saying, it doesn't necessarily mean doing away with all this. It just means I'm reminded of when you and I both really first started on the social media marketing track together, Jen.
Yeah.
We were told to look at the numbers always, how many followers do you have? How many this do you have? It was not about, there was talk of engagement, but there was a lot of talk about the numbers as well. And it was like more. And well, I think we're all realizing that more isn't necessarily better.
Yeah, more is exhausting.
More is exhausting and overwhelming, as I said. Yeah. And the North Node in Leo is really about opening your heart and actually reconnecting with people at a deeper level and at a more joyful level, rather than this this very, I don't want to kind of diss Aquarian energy, because it has huge strengths, but it is the South Node in this chart, and the South Node is what we're moving away from. So we tend to look at the more negative qualities. So it's moving away from this never quite feeling like you fit in anywhere. It's about opening your heart up and really getting to know people at a deeper level. And that leads into the Cancer of kind of your family and your home, and really connecting at this more emotional, in a more emotional way, let's say.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, because when I'm listening to you and I'm looking at the chart, for me, what strikes me about all of this is part of the alienation we feel is because we have this polarity. Like, look at everyone else, they're successful, they've got it all, which kind of exasperated because we're on social media all the time and we're seeing all these fake things. Like, we don't know if it's real or fake. It looks real. I mean, there's that, like, oh, this is they're successful, they've got it, they've figured it out. And so it creates more alienation because they look so perfect. And to me, I look at this idea of the whole Aquarius aspect, which is very curious and innovative, giving us that opportunity to go, I'm choosing not to be alienated. I'm choosing to find my tribe, or to go back to my family and look at them through the eyes of love instead of separation, through the eyes of connection.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's that energy in this chart, which I think is very strong. There's strong energy of cooperation.
There is indeed. And I do want to mention, because it's so in my face to me, that this eclipse is very much affecting the USA. And like all the eclipses have over, since the total eclipse last August, particularly, because Black Moon Lilith is exactly on the USA's Pluto on this eclipse. And the eclipse itself, the sun and the moon, are conjunct the USA's Mercury. So those of us in the USA are going to experience probably the biggest seismic changes coming from without, or geopolitically as well, and as well as the internal seismic changes that this eclipse is bringing. And I do, I'm not one of those doom and gloom astrologers, but I do want to warn everybody that things are going to be quite contentious. There's probably going to be quite a lot of angry energy, especially, the Facebook keyboard warriors and things, with that Mars crossing the South Node. And, I only warn you, really, the listeners, so that you can choose not to be that person, not to get involved, because things are going to unfold. Pluto, as I've mentioned before, is relentless. Black Moon Lilith on the USA's Pluto is really going to uncover some big stuff, I think. Jupiter turns direct on the 10th, 2 days before the eclipse. And of course, Jupiter's in Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. And that's at 13 degrees, and maybe Jen can talk about that in a second. So, there is quite a lot of well, I say the word again, seismic energy of change. I'm going to say watch the news. I'm not going to say sit watching the news 24 hours a day, but watch for what's happening in the news, because I think there's going to be some big things occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It's big things occurring, but this is the exciting. We have to remember that this earthquake energy we're in this energy of tremendous change, which is kind of a blasting energy. It's not a soft energy. It's very there's definite change being made, and we are changing, and the world we're living in, and certainly in the USA, there's a lot of change happening. And this idea with the voice, being on Mercury, the idea of the expression of us standing up, which is what this conflict is all about. It's coming out of our holes where we've been hiding and waiting for someone else to tell us what to do, and like, well, there's no one else, so I have to do it. So the understanding is, again, that discernment, like you were saying, is if you are choosing to...
Hello? Are you there? We've lost you, Jen, for a second. Hello? I'm just going to pause the recording while I find out what's happened to Jen.
Okay.
So Jen's back, everybody. I'll let her continue where she was.
Because we're talking about discernment and change, like, the excitement of change. It's like the discernment, what you decide to put your energy into. This is Mars's lesson to us, as well as when you're bringing all these different energies of Pluto and Uranus together. This new innovation is about us deciding, do I want to stay in that low level sandbox where I'm playing with people, I'm shooting peas at people, or do I want to lift myself above that and focus my energy in a more intentional way? So that's the point of this discernment, or this energy, this busting away. The crisis energy is about making us choose, where are we putting our energy? How are we allowing? This is a time to listen in and let that information settle, and then take action. So this is divine action, or what do you call it? Action where we're following our intuition. We're not just throwing balls at everyone. We're focusing in and really putting our energy where it counts, being who we are and showing up as that. Interesting, the 13 in Jupiter, and Jupiter just having gone forward, is the 13 is the divine goddess energy. And there is so much divine goddess energy in this chart that has been going on. There's a lot that's been going on. It really feels like, to me, it's the writing of the female energy coming into its own power and saying, I'm here, I'm an equal player. Well, if we want to be an equal player, then we have to move ourselves away from that blaming stuff, from the victimization stuff. It's not like you can't say what happened and what is happening. You can say it, but be dispassionate about it if you can, and focus where you want to go with this.
Yes.
Pointing fingers doesn't really take you in a direction. Have the direction and focus your energy, your talk, your conversation, because again, this is about communication. This time we're in, this eclipse, is about communicating who you are, getting clearer and clearer. So the 13, and remembering that in the rest of the world, or much of the world, this eclipse is happening on the 13th. And the 13 is the number of sudden change. So it's a very Uranus number. It's unexpected change, shocking change, rapid change. It's going to force us to rebuild things. Like, things are going to fall apart. The foundations that we've been on are falling apart, and we're going to have to gather our strength, our discernment, and choose what we're building. And this, again, matches with the the Pluto and the moon and all this stuff, is that rebuilding, choosing where are we building our new place, our new shell, and what is it for? Like, what's the focus?
And I do want to, say, because I may not have said it at the start, that a solar eclipse is a new moon. So it is a new beginning. And that adds to what Jen was saying about, the rapid sudden change with Jupiter shifting direction at that number. And I do want to mention as well that when Jupiter entered Scorpio back in October, that was when the kind of resurgence of the Me Too movement happened. So we're going to see something come up around that. And there is the potential for it to be, really kind of moving, not beyond it, but moving forward with it, as Jen said, about not sitting in the victim mode, but about moving forward and doing something about it and saying, I'm not going to take this anymore, kind of thing. That was in the past, but let's move on and expand. And in Scorpio, this is about some deeply bonded, deep psychological kind of energy that can be quite magical. So with Jupiter turning direct and retracing his steps of his retrograde, I think there's going to be some resolution around the Me Too movement that will help people move forward.
I agree. I think this time really is about new seeds are being planted because we're shifting the energy. And so it's like when you clean house, which is what we're doing, we're taking like the deepest, darkest secrets, and we've been working through them and going, I feel all the shame. I'm supposed to be this certain person. I'm supposed to play a certain role because other people are telling me to, and society is telling me to. And now we're coming to that busting the dam energy where it's like, the rage is so great that it's just burning down the walls, and we're like, I don't care. Like, I have to speak up. I have to express myself. And we're being encouraged by the idea of the female energy rising and going, because when we talk about the female energy, and we're not dissing the male energy, but we have been male dominated for a long time. So when the female is rising to take her rightful place, the male has to kind of come down to meet her. It's like that seesaw energy, and it's that aspect of the female part is our intuition. It's the side that shows us the path, that connects us to divine energy. The male energy is what gets us to act on what is right. And when I say right, I mean right for us. What is the thing? What is the result? Like when we're looking at the Me Too movement, do we just want to go around pointing fingers forever? Or do we actually want to have change in our world? The change meaning individuals can say, no, I'm not going to accept this. And I want to build laws that are going to give me more freedom. So it's in this conflict that we begin to get clearer about what it is we desire, and so we become much better at communicating what it is we want, and that gives us a bigger platform when we can speak more clearly, when we can connect with our neighbors, with our tribe, with our villages. Then we can have those discussions, and people can go, what you're saying makes sense, because we're not telling other people they're wrong. We're just saying, this is what I need, and are you with me, or would you like to help me? And it becomes a consensual act, an act of beginning, because a lot of this energy is about earth-based energy, making these new rules and new ideas real.
And it kind of cracks me up that Black Moon Lilith is exactly conjunct the Pluto of the USA in this eclipse, because Black Moon Lilith, I see her as our too muchness, where we've been told she was the original woman, if you like, in the myths. She was made equally with Adam before Eve came along. So, and she has been repressed and vilified for centuries. And here she is now on this eclipse going, I'm not taking any more of this shit.
Yes, exactly. I'm claiming my rightful position.
Exactly. And she is quite ragey, but rightfully so. She's, she is the righteous anger of of the divine female that has been vilified for so long. And again, yes, like Jen said, that's nothing against the men. It's not about taking over. This is about taking a rightful place next, male and female next to each other, bringing balance back in. So, and it brings me back to the Dalai Lama's quote, actually, about the Western woman will save the world, because this is very focused on the USA, which is very much seen as the West, if you like. And here is Black Moon Lilith on the Pluto of the USA chart. It's quite fascinating.
Yes, it's fascinating. And I think the other aspect of this is this recognition that we have lived under these double standards, right? On the surface, the USA has this whole thing about being this country of the free. And yet underneath, that's all been a big lie, because underneath, women have still been playing those roles of servitude.
Yeah.
And taking, lesser pay and letting the husband rule the roost and all these things, right?
And this is nothing about this goes way deeper than, women becoming CEOs and becoming like a clone of a male. This is way deeper than that.
A much higher resonance.
Yeah,
that was a smaller step up or staircase. Now this is the big leap up into the big leagues, where we're going. The energy, just like the tale of the series and Persephone and Pluto, right? She was dragged down into the underworld. So here we have the underworld, and Ceres is the Mother Earth and the grain and bringing food. And she was so distraught that her daughter was gone and nobody would help her, that she stopped bringing life into the world. And so that's when they had to take action. It's like, who cares about a crying female, right? But now, like, oh, we're not getting food, we're not getting the things we need. Oh, we better go and make a compromise. So the compromise was 6 months. She would stay underground, under the underworld with Pluto, and 6 months she would come and live with her mother. And this is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about this idea of coming to terms with that, the equality of male and female, or the equality of the earth and the underworld.
And the balance between the male and the female, and the black and the white and everything. And, it goes so much higher in resonance, as you said. Well, I think you wanted to talk about the Sabian symbol, I think, for this new this solar eclipse, and I want to talk about a different symbol. So you go ahead and talk about the Sabian.
Okay, so the Sabian symbol for this month, for this moon, it's 21 degrees Cancer, because this is 20.41, is a prima donna singing. So it's a symbol of an inevitable culmination for individual opportunity, of an enduring contribution of skill and talent to whatever may be the soul's recurrent and constant rediscovery of itself. So here the polarization of human values becomes a creative encouragement for the common man. And this is really what we were talking about. The idea that if you are somebody who is bursting to sing your song, as each of us are in our own way, this is the time to sing your song. When you start focusing on expressing your song and singing it, you don't have time to worry about what someone else is doing. What are the numbers? You just get into that joyful place of singing, and then taking what comes from that singing. Like maybe somebody comes to you and says, oh, will you come and sing in my club, or will you sign a record contract? And then you follow those steps that open up to you, that feel connected. So it's about expressing yourself in the world instead of waiting for somebody to invite you to express yourself. It's like, just be who you are, be the magnificent self, and bring that energy out into the world. So then you won't have to worry about being a victim, right? Because that thing of like, I'm not going to express myself because it's going to disturb somebody, or they won't like me, or I'll hear some complaints. None of that matters when you're just being you, and just say, well, if they don't like it, they can walk away, or whatever. Maybe I'll meet some new people. It's the same idea of coming to terms with who we are as individuals, with everything, our farting and our burping and our weird hair and our weird bodies. Like this idea that we're going to be like, oh, if I just behave in the right way, I'll have the right shape.
Oh my goodness, my phone.
Right?
Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's always ringing when there's an important point.
I know.
It's a sign from the universe.
It never rings at this time of day, but there you go.
So funny. But that's the idea that waiting to be invited, or waiting to be perfect, or thinking you need to look a certain way or be a certain way, and you'll be so smooth and gorgeous and not have anything, you won't burp, you won't do this. And of course, that's so ridiculous, because we're human. We're meant, we have that animal side of us, which is wonderful. We are meant to burp and fart and have wrinkles and age and get in touch with this without despising who we are.
So, and I wanted to actually read the Chandra symbol, which are symbols that were created by Elias Lonsdale, an astrologer who in his book Inside Degrees, and I think his symbols were channeled as the Sabian symbols were.
Yes.
And I always find they give another wrinkle to these energies. And this one, 21 degrees Cancer, and there is an element of focusing within with a Cancer new moon, because we have the sun and the moon together in the sign that represents our innermost emotions. So if you think of that as I read the symbol, so the actual symbol is high up on a mountain, an eagle's nest, and it says heritage and birthright, the soul's inheritance, being granted a belongingness, an attunement to rarefied worlds, consciousness triumphant, maintaining the crown vista of universal essentials. You are imbued with natural wonders and treasures, wakeful, vigilant, and clear. You have superlative faculties of sifting through and finding what we all need to see here. Remarkably untouched by personal limitations and distortions, called upon to uphold the truth and knowing it, serene, focused, and unsentimental, diving right to the place where the goods are, impeccable skills used under constraint. The finest accompanies each breath, the mark of previous karmic attainments of the highest kind, resuming where you left off, steady, self-assured, and righteous in the best sense, beyond reproach. And there's a lot in there to unpack, but I love these symbols because, to my mind, this is really encapsulating a lot of what we've talked about. There's a lot of soul inheritance, karmic energy with Pluto and the moon in this chart. There's this element of focusing in on what you really want. We've talked about that, and about building your own new shell, as Jen called it, and there's a real element of what was the term in this again? It was about really diving into exactly what you want, having stepped back with that detachment of the South Node in Aquarius to use the best so that you can move forward. So, it's going to be a challenging eclipse season. There's going to be a lot of disruption around and a lot of kind of aggro and things like that. But really the opportunities amongst it, I often find these bigger opportunities amongst challenging energy rather than kind of floaty along kind of energy that gives you no push to get anything done.
True, true. And I'm just noticing that Saturn is at 4 degrees Capricorn, and of course, Saturn is the one who insists that we use this time. It's about what do you call it? It's the crops where you're gathering the crops. What do you call it? You
Harvest.
harvest, right? Which is it's kind of that harvest energy, because now we've passed the halfway mark of the year and we're moving into harvest time, and it's the sowing what you reap energy, and Saturn really is speaking to that. And that 4 is about making things real. It's about laying a firm, solid foundation. And I didn't read the whole Sabian thing, but after listening to you, I wanted to just add that this here, the keyword in the Sabian symbol is excellence. And this is part of this energy. If applying ourselves diligently to what we need to do to get where we're going. So instead of being impatient, like, I don't want to deal with this, I'm so angry, it's the other people, is applying ourselves diligently to the work at hand, because we know the goal. We can see where we're going. And so we have to rise above the chatter, the yelling, and focus on where we're going, right? When it says the degree is an overflowing richness of self through its full command of its own deep and genuine potential. And when negative, superficial self-affirmation and unseemingly display. So when we're focusing on the excellence, on the end result, and we're going deep, we're allowing this to really change us, we're welcoming the change, then we do have this incredible opportunity to bring new things around. I think it's a really important time for all of us, because we have been like children. We've been like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to hide under my rock. Let somebody else take care of it.
And I love that you mentioned that Saturn is at 4 degrees and 43 minutes of Capricorn and this solar eclipse, because the lunar eclipse, which we won't be talking about yet, but is at 4 degrees and 44 minutes of Leo and Aquarius. So it's almost like Saturn is leading us into this total lunar eclipse, which is actually going to last more than a minute, of a full blood red moon on July the 27th. And we'll talk more about that in the next podcast. But it seems like a fairly good place to end, with Saturn leading us at that same degree into the fulfillment of a lunar eclipse at the end of the month. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's really rather wonderful, wonderous, magical how this all works.
Oh, I think it's very weirdly magical. So, there you go. So, Jen, is there anything you want to say to the podcast listeners before we call it a day for this episode?
No, just focus on where you're going.
Yeah, cool. And, for anybody that's listening to the podcast, through my link or just through finding us anywhere, where can people find you on the web, Jen?
At my website, jenduchenne.com, or on Facebook, Illuminate8, or you can look for me, Jen Duchenne. Instagram. How about you, Louise? Where can people find you?
Well, everything's pretty much under my name. LouiseEddington.com, Louise Eddington Astrologer Facebook page, Louise Eddington on Instagram. I have a Facebook group as well called Planetary Magic, and I think you have a Facebook group too.
Yes, mine is called the Woo-Woo Weirdo Light Club of the World.
Yeah. So come and join us, wherever you want to, wherever you play on the interwebs, come and join us and come and talk to us. but also subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on iTunes and iHeartRadio and various podcast places. So if you search Weirdly Magical with Jen and Lou, you will find us to subscribe. So thanks for listening, everybody. And for now, it's bye from Lou.
And bye from Jen.